Right, cool. So a couple of things. We're going to talk a little bit about adverse childhood experiences. I've introduced that before. I'm going to give you a handout on adverse childhood experiences so you have a good sense of what those are. We're going to talk a little bit about 40 developmental assets, and then culminating in this idea of culturally responsive pedagogy. And I also want you to note that you've talked about all of this stuff in your presentations. And I want you to be able to align the philosophies with the people who articulated those philosophies. All right. So with culturally responsive pedagogy, the person responsible for kind of coining that phrase is Geneva Gay. All right. So if you hear either culturally responsive pedagogy or Geneva Gay, you know where those two are connected. All right. Yuri Bronsonbrenner. What did Yuri do? What is his philosophy, or what is his model that he uses? Do you remember? Yuri Bronsonbrenner.
Right?
Yep. Ecological systems model. Very good. And what was the thrust of that model? What were some of the tenets or the thrust of that model? What was Yuri saying about child development, about human development?
Different layers, essentially. So you start in the middle, and that's your personal thing that you go with, and then you expand it a little bit in another circle, and then it's your family, and another one is friends, and another one is like school, the place you live, and then just the whole world.
Right? Yeah. So everything is contextual, right? So human development is contextual, is what this ecological system model offers us, right? So context is important. And then Lewis Moll with the funds of knowledge. And what's the kind of thinking behind the funds of knowledge? Do students come into our classrooms as empty cups, waiting to be filled with our great and wonderful knowledge? Are you empty when you walk into the classroom? No, right? So the funds of knowledge says that there are things that our students know, and as teachers, we have to pull from that pool of knowledge that students know, right? So funds of knowledge. And then the Rosenthal effect. What was that? What is the Rosenthal effect?
That's the one with like high expectations and then set the bar higher to the higher standard.
Yes, right? So another way to talk about that is the Pygmalion effect, or the self-fulfilling prophecy, in that high expectations yield high achievement. Low expectations do the same, right? So that Rosenthal effect goes both ways. And what about Alfred Adler? What ideas or what do we contribute to Alfred Adler? And I'll give you a hint. SSB. SSB. What do we contribute to Alfred Adler? What are all human beings going after? Or what motivates human beings? Yes.
Adrian said safety, security, and
That's exactly right. I'm glad that she said that. I am glad that she said that. Right? So Alfred Adler is where we get this idea of safety, significance, and belonging. And what drives how people get safety, significance, and belonging? What drives that? So does everybody get safety, significance, and belonging exactly the same? No, they don't. So what drives it? What makes that different? So goals. So we do that. Goals. There's two that I'm looking for that are in relationship to each other. And they both start with C's. Culture and context, right? Yeah. So goals, culture, and context. So when we talk about these adverse childhood experiences, what we recognize is that there are things that happen to young people that are not their fault. And we'll talk about what some of those things are. And then the 40 developmental assets are the things that can interact or counteract those things, right? So I'm going to pass out first the adverse childhood experiences. So what are the three categories of adverse childhood experiences? You might find them at insert 1. So what are the three categories? Abuse, neglect,
Household dysfunction.
and dysfunction. All right. So these are things that happen. We might call these reasons. We might even call these excuses as to why things happen. And understanding that these things happen, and again, the things that oftentimes drive this is context and culture, and goals drives this as well. And so we have to recognize that people are doing the best they can, and oftentimes they fail, right? One of the big reasons that these adverse childhood experiences even occur in the first place is because of sin, right? The sin nature of human beings, right? Not to live up to their best selves. So we have these three categories. Now, I recognize a problem. Is that enough for me to recognize what the problem is? So a doctor says, your arm is broken. And they show me the x-ray, they show me where I have the hairline fracture, they say all that. What is my next step? What am I expecting the doctor to say next? Andre, your arm is broken. Have a great day. See you on Tuesday. No, what do I expect? Some kind of solution, right? So we'll talk about these adverse childhood experiences, but what I'd like to offer is that these 40 developmental assets create the buffers given these things, right? So if we look at some of the risk factors, right? So if the more ACEs you have in those categories, the more likely you are to be exposed to these risk factors, right? So alcoholism, smoking, illicit drug use, obesity, suicide attempts, depression, anxiety, teenage unintended pregnancies, spontaneous or abortions or fetal death, intimate partner violence, poor quality of life, blah, 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 blah. In terms of diseases, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, heart disease, liver disease, sexually transmitted diseases, lung cancer, death before age 65 can all be traced back using the ACEs study to one of these three categories, right? So does this now dictate what people can and will do? Is this a dictator of their life? No, it's not, right? What is the thing that dictates people's lives? Well, we can say God's will and all that kind of stuff, but ultimately, what dictates the success or failure of an individual, particularly the way we see it in Western society? They're what? Say it starts with a C and ends in ois. Their choice. That's right? So their ability to make choices. However, we talked about authentic choices and false choices, right? So false choices are the ones that are obvious, peas or cake, right? That's not a real choice in terms of trying to get to goal. But 7 P's versus 5 P's is a better choice, right? So if people are caught in this cycle, what kinds of choices, in terms of their worldview, in terms of the context, in terms of the culture, what kinds of choices might they be limited to if there is not an outside force introducing other choices? I would suggest that they get caught in the same cycle that they're already in, right? Cycles of abuse, of neglect, or dysfunction. And that becomes what they know, and we start to replicate those things, right? Many of us are going to college because our parents went to college. And others of us are going to college because our parents wanted to go to college but couldn't, and so they put that in us to go ourselves, go in their place, right? So that's important. So these developmental assets build something called resiliency. And what is resiliency? What is resiliency? And if you had your heart broken, anybody like me been a heartbreaker? Okay. Right? Did your heart stay broken forever? No. Why? How? He's like, yes. And she's sitting right here next to me in class. No, just joking. No, it's okay. It's okay, man. I feel your pain. Yeah. Oh, it's you. Okay. No, why? Because you did things to kind of build it up, to fix it, right? You were able to bounce back from that adversity. And so resilience is this idea that you can bounce back. Are people born with resilience? Or is it something that people can develop? Why do you say develop?
Nobody handles failure well at first.
So nobody handles failure well at first, right? So you kind of get used to failure. Do you have somebody in your family that people call strong? They say, this person is strong. What does that mean when they say that about a family member?
Usually that they can get through hard times.
That they can get through hard times. Were they born getting through those hard times? More often than not. More often than not, no, right? They weren't born that way, but they developed that skill, right? So One thing I will put in here is this idea of skills. So if you're taking notes, we really want to develop skills in our students, right? So these 40 developmental assets are really pointed towards developing skills in our students. Skills for resilience, right? So if the world says, so what would a good parent say to a child that the world says there's something about you that's unacceptable, right? So maybe it's your hairstyle, or hair color, how your body operates, works or doesn't work. Maybe it's your nose is, you think your nose is too big or too fat, like mine, right? What would a good parent say to their child about those kinds of things, about their physical ability or about how they look? What would a good parent say about that? What are they trying to do? What would they be trying to do with their kid?
Just make them feel comfortable who they are with who they are.
Make them feel comfortable with who they are, right? No matter what the world says about them, make them comfortable about who they are. Why? They'll feel bad about themselves, and interestingly enough, they'll start falling into these ACEs, right? So these ACEs will start to kind of take effect. So there's that. So let's pass out these 40 developmental assets. When you get these 40 developmental assets, I want you to check all of the ones that have applied to you in your life. So just read over it. And all the ones that have applied to you in your life, put a check by. Meaning, I've had this or I've experienced this.
I know.
So just read those, circle, highlight, check, whatever works for you. Which of those have you had in your own life?
Do it individually or as a section?
Yeah, we can do either as a group or as individual sections. Give me just a couple more minutes. So now what I want you to do is, in each of those categories, so category of support or empowerment or boundaries and expectations, constructive use of time, commitment to learning, positive values, or social competencies, or positive identity, I want you to rate your top three. So what were your top three in terms of what allowed you to grow and develop? Out of all of those categories, what do you think your top three large categories were? So is that your number one?
Number one. It's a large category.
Yeah, so the larger categories, so the whole thing. Yep. All right. As you're looking at those 40 developmental assets, and you put in your top three that made the difference, what were some of the things that you put that really made a difference in your life in terms of those top three? Which categories really made a big difference in your life? What did you put?
I said support number one, positive values number two, and boundaries and expectations three.
Okay.
Just because I feel like my family, I have two older sisters, and my parents have all been really influential in those three.
Okay. Sweet. So having parents and two parents, I would assume, right? Two parents, focus on those things really helped you. All right. Other folks, what did you put? I need two more people. We'll just, yes.
I had social competencies, constructive use of time, and positive identity.
Okay. And why those three? Or what about those three did you find to be positive in your development?
Well, when I was younger, I was in a lot of different programs, and there was like a ton of different like sports things and camps, like near my hometown. That helped a lot.
Okay. To be able to manage all of those things. All right. Cool. One more person. Just one. Anyone? Yes, Levi. So your first one was support, and boundaries and expectations, and lastly, commitment to learn. So those three were the things that kind of formulated who you are today. All right, cool. So I wanted to introduce you to all of these concepts, and particularly these two things, because I believe that the adverse childhood experiences is the problem, right? But the solution is the developmental assets. Did you notice, were there any of those developmental assets that had anything to do with spending lots of money? Right? Were there special programs that were in this developmental assets, these 40 developmental assets, that people had to apply to or had to do special stuff to do? No, right? Are there things there that people did for you without a cost to you, or even sometimes a cost to them either, right? Other than time, right? So I want to keep that in mind as we look at this adverse childhood experiences and these 40 developmental assets. and keeping in mind all of these lessons, all of these theorists that we've kind of talked about in the course of the class as we go to our final case study, right? So if you're online and you can go to the Moodle, you'll see, and I'll try to turn this on. So our final case study is a film called The Boys of Baraka. Has anyone seen that film, The Boys of Baraka? All right, cool. So what I'd encourage you to do is I want to start part of it today, and but I want you to think about it in terms of these childhood experiences. So there are 4 individuals that I want you to pay attention to in this documentary. So it is Richard and Romesh, R-O-M-E-S-H, Romesh. And I want you to pay attention to the ACEs that they have, given this, how we've kind of laid out ACEs. And then what are the 40 developmental assets, either pluses or minuses, ones that they have, or what are ones that they're missing? All right, so out of that list. And then there's Devon. What are the ACEs that he is up against? And then what are the 40 developmental assets that he either has or are missing? And you don't have to list all 40, but just give me some, right? And then Montre is the 4th young man that we'll be paying attention to. And again, looking at what are some of the ACEs that he faces and what are some of the developmental assets that he either has or are missing that, yeah, and all of this is focused, well, I'll get to the other focus. So this is right in your Moodle. If you go back up to the class, you'll see it right at resources right here. So film reflection entries, Boys of Baraka's case study. I'm going to click on that. The film is here. And if you'll hit the lights, I'll just start. We'll just do like the first 5 minutes so you get a sense of the film. All right? Thank you. Do you understand?
My name is Miss Jackson. How are you? this is something I want you all to think about, okay? As young men in Baltimore City, most of you have about 3 choices, okay? 3 things that might happen to you by the time you turn 18. The first thing that you might get is you might get an orange jumpsuit with some nice bracelets that go in your arms, okay? The second one is a nice black suit with a nice brown box. Think about that one. And then the third one is you might get a nice black gown and a nice cap and a diploma in your hand. Gentlemen, I'm here today to talk to you about the Baraka School. The Baraka School is an all-male boarding school in Kenya, East Africa. Everybody asks me, is this a school for bad children? Is this a boot camp? Or is this a jail? It's none of those things, okay? This is an educational opportunity, okay? So I want young men who are interested in changing their attitude, their behavior. How many people here have ever been suspended? Suspended. Isn't that nice? Everybody put their hands down. All of you are not going to graduate from high school. That's why we have programs like Baraka, because we want to make sure that you all succeed. We want to make sure that you all graduate from high school and go to college. How many women talk about drugs? For real. People like, oh, they doing drugs, sticking you, and they all messing up their blood. I know I'm smart. It's going out loud and stupid and dumb people. But see, I can't let them get here. Let them stay out there. And I don't want my brother, my baby brother anyway. No project. We're not trying it. I don't want to. Good. I don't want him to. You know, I'm strong. I'm a strong man. Like, oh, what's your name? Frederick Douglass. I'm strong, just like him. I'm strong, and I'm gonna tell you I'm strong. No one in their heads can wait for that. I can't wait for that. I never seen one of these because I don't never travel. Both of my children are going to Africa this year. But when the letter came, congratulations, Ronnie Schmitz, congratulations, Richard Cupid. Boy, was I happy. They accepted both of them. He come running home. I'm like, boy, what's wrong with you? He's like, nah, I'm going to Africa. I'm like, boy, please. When he came, I said, boy, please. I'm like, what you talking about? I called his neighbor, my sorry mother. The first day I talked to her, she asked me what would happen if one goes and one don't go. And I said, don't make one a king and make the other one a killer.
I'm gonna just stop it right there. We'll finish the rest of this tomorrow. Can you hit the lights for me? What do you already recognize about the context and culture that the first 2 boys that we're talking about, Richard and Ramesh, what kind of context and what kind of culture are they in? Let's back up just for a second. What is the purpose of play? What is the purpose of play? To strengthen social skills. What else? You ever seen wolf pups play with each other? What do they do? What do? They wrestle, they bite, they hunt. So play actually is a mimicking of adulthood, right? So they'll strengthen those social skills for adulthood. What did you notice about how the kids were playing? It was violent. What games did they show them playing? Were they playing tag? Kickball? What were they playing? Yes.
Right away they were fighting.
So they were play fighting, right? What else were they playing? Shooting each other. What else were they playing? Getting arrested, right? So play is extremely important because what they're playing tells us something about their context. And so if play is to practice those social skills for adulthood, what does their play tell us about their context? There's a lot of violence. There's a lot of negative police engagement. There's a lot of other things. So play is an important thing to pay attention to, right? Because games are more than games. They are conditioning us for adulthood and the societies that we're going to live in, right? So if you want to watch ahead, go right ahead. But otherwise, we'll follow this up on Friday. All right? Have a great day. See you on Friday.
Do it.
These are extras.
Oh, wonderful.
Have a good
Thank
day.
you.
What's our exam?
Yeah, looking at this, it is the 11:30 to 1:30 on Tuesday and Thursday. Yep.
So,
Wait, which one's us? Oh. I see that. Have a good one.
So I would say folks can take either.
okay,
So you can come to either; they'll be the same.
okay.